Whereas normally everyone would inquire from Lord Caitanya. And Caitanya Charitamrita is just full of discussions, so many, in which different devotees, and generally great devotees, are inquiring from Lord Caitanya. But here in this case, Lord Caitanya decided to take the role of the student and question Lord Caitanya. And Ramananda Roy, you might think that for a devotee, I don't know if you can imagine, but if you knew Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada suddenly started asking you, how do we become Krishna conscious actually? Can you help me? Can you tell me? We would think, oh, what? This is just not on. It must be the other way around. But Ramananda Roy, understanding that this is what Lord Caitanya wanted, so he decided, all right, I'll sort of not exactly play along, but I will, interact in that way. And so that's what happened. And Lord Caitanya will go through the questions and will go through the answers. There are two sets of questions. First set, Lord Caitanya is asking basically about different levels of Krishna consciousness. That's the idea. From the beginning. So in the beginning he asks, please, can you recite a verse from the revealed scriptures concerning the ultimate goal of life? That's what he wants. What is the ultimate goal of life? So anyway, we'll see how Ramananda Roy replies. He doesn't just go to the ultimate goal of life as such, but it's a very much step-by-step interaction where Ramananda Roy suggests, anyway, you'll see in a minute. And then it was actually the next day that they got together again, and Lord Caitanya started asking Ramananda Roy, what is the best? Who is the best person? That sort of idea. Yeah. And what is the best? Who is the best person? And what is the best activity to perform? This type of idea. Anyway, we'll see about that because we'll get there shortly. It can be the subject for a great seminar, actually, which could go on for days and days and for really quite a while, because, the questions are always very profound, but they're always very relevant to devotees and people who are trying to develop as devotees. So it's very relevant, and all the answers which Ramananda Roy gives, they can all be explored. There are different aspects and different perspectives. But just today, maybe we should do it sometime. But just for today, we'll just touch on these things. And, of course, if some of you here are really new to Krishna consciousness, and maybe you've never been in one of our programs at all, I think still you'll be able to follow it. But particularly for those of you who are practicing devotees and chanting regularly and reading our literatures, Prabhupada's books regularly, I think you'll find it very interesting and revealing too. So that's what we're going to do. And here we go. Please repeat after me. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Very good. So here we go, devotees. Let's get into it. So I already told you the first question, but let's just read it again. Lord Caitanya, the way Prabhupada's translated the verse, Lord Prabhupada says, or the way he's presented it, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered Ramananda Roy. Yes, okay. So, he ordered him, recite a verse from the revealed scriptures concerning the ultimate goal of life. And Ramananda Roy replied, if one executes the prescribed duties of his social position, he awakens his original Krishna consciousness. What he's referring to, prescribed duties of your social position, he's referring to what is called Varnashram Dharma, which, according to the sort of state of affairs of the tradition in India. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Wow. Sure. Bit overwhelming. I should garland my computer because that's where it's all coming from. So, right, Varnashram, what's around Varnashram? Well, I was just saying that according to the current state of affairs, or even not so much current really, but if you went back 50 years, and particularly if you went back 100 years, and even more particularly 200, going back a while in India, it is what has been called the caste system. The caste system, which, currently, or just over the however many few hundred years, not if you really go back into the history, but at least in the somewhat more recent period, last few hundred years or so, this is struggling a little, I think. So it was all by birth. If you were born in a certain family, then you were considered to be a member of a particular social group. And this is definitely struggling. That one seemed to be struggling before too. Because you know what we do normally? We let the battery go totally flat and we change it. And in the process of going totally flat as a pancake, then it goes on and off. It's an interesting phenomenon. It goes on and off and off and on. So let's see how we do. let's see if we do better with this. So yes, the caste system, if you're born in a certain type of family, which is identified actually in terms of occupation, occupational duty. If you are born in the family of a teacher, you're a teacher. Full stop. End of story. And if anyone tries to tell you anything else, it's nonsense. Is someone changing the battery of that one? I think we could use one sooner or later. Yeah, right. So, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra. The Brahmins were the priestly class and intellectual and the teachers, actually. Yeah, so you might be, you might have failed the equivalent of a matric, which in South Africa you'd probably have to try fairly hard to fail it. Shoo. Yeah. But still, you're a teacher because you're born in that family, that type of family. So, yeah. So that's how it was. Well, before it was by qualification, actually, yeah. What sort of person you actually were, rather than just an official thing. From birth, they'd more or less take you in with a rubber stamp on your forehead, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra. So, at least traditionally, even around the time of Lord Caitanya, it was still like that, but not entirely. It was on the basis of qualification. And if you're qualified as a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra, you're accepted as that if you actually had the qualification. But then that was in the context of performing that occupational duty as a service to Krishna. Not just being a teacher as such, but being a teacher who is a devotee and who's teaching.
Can I change it?
You can. We'll be back with you in a moment. So anyway, the point was that by performing your natural duty, what came to you naturally as a service to Krishna, then you'd become Krishna conscious in a very natural way, because you'd be engaged in some occupational duty, which was just, really what you were. Not like trying to put a square peg into a round hole or something like that, but doing what comes naturally to you. And so it's easy for you to do, but you do it as a service to Krishna. So that's what Ramananda Roy answered. And Lord Caitanya said, he didn't actually exactly say no, but what he said was, this is external, because it's in terms of your bodily nature, your psychophysical nature as a conditioned soul within this material world. But we want to know about the ultimate goal of life. And that's something, it's not something worldly, but it's something very transcendental, spiritual, beyond just worldly considerations. So, okay. So the Lord replied, this is external. You had better tell me of some other means. And Ramananda Roy didn't try to justify himself or anything like that. He just made another suggestion. And this is it. to offer the results of one's activities to Krishna is the essence of all perfection. And he's really putting it forward as being something very significant. And he quotes a verse to sort of not justify it, but just kind of substantiate it, you could say. And it's a famous verse. It's a great verse. If you study Bhagavad Gita, you'd know it's one of our favorites. It's actually chapter 9, verse 27. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yat jahoshi dadasi yat tapasyasi konteya tat kurushva mad arpanam. My dear son of Kunti, it's Lord Krishna speaking, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer in sacrifice, whatever you give in charity, and whatever austerities you perform, all the results of such activities should be offered to me, Krishna. So, that sounds pretty good, but it's still, at least to some degree, in the context of what comes naturally to you by material standards, in terms of your physical nature, your psychological nature. At least to some degree, if not absolutely, but to some degree that's there. So Lord Caitanya, now you might think, because if you study Bhagavad Gita regularly, you might think, oh, that's great. That's a good one. Right answer. Lord Caitanya says that this is also external. Please proceed and speak further on this matter. So Ramananda Roy replied, to give up one's occupational duty, whatever comes naturally to you, whatever you're trained or educated in, give it up. Give it up and, that's what he says. To give up one's occupational duties in the Varna ashram system is the essence of perfection. Not exactly just give it up, like give it up and don't do anything, because now you've given it up. So that's gone, and what you're going to do? There's no alternative apparently suggested, but there is. By implication, there's an alternative, and that is, really speaking, do whatever Krishna wants. If Krishna tells you jump, immediately jump. And if Krishna tells you clap on the way down, or click your feet together on the way down, do that. If you're with me on that one. It's an old joke. So, yeah. So Lord Caitanya then responds, actually, Hare Krishna, Ramananda Roy gives a verse to substantiate, and it's another one, it's an even more famous verse. It's almost the most famous verse. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayashami ma shuchaha. If you know that verse, many devotees, if there's only one verse they know, it's this one. Give up, just give up your duties, sarva dharma, give up your dharma and surrender to me, to Krishna. And Krishna says, I'll deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So after hearing Ramananda Roy speak in this way, Lord Caitanya again rejected his statement. Now, we must say, it's not that Lord Caitanya is saying it is simply wrong. Don't do it. Like, for example, if you ask someone, what is 2 + 2? And they say 5, then you can just say it's just wrong. It's not like it's partially right or, good try. It's just wrong. You're out. You are out of the competition. So, but because the original question, which is being addressed, is what is the ultimate goal of life? Not just, what's okay, what's quite good, and what may help you to some degree. But we want just the ultimate, the absolute truth. And even things which are kind of like stepping stones in the direction of that, then they're not quite what we're looking for, if you get what I mean. Do you get what I mean? Anyway, we hope we're not confusing anyone who's a fan of Bhagavad Gita. So, Lord Caitanya rejected his statement and said, go ahead and say something more. And Ramananda Roy replied, devotional service mixed with empiric knowledge is the essence of perfection. What this means is devotional service, which of course can't be wrong, can it? How could it be wrong? But now it's mixed with empiric knowledge. Empiric knowledge in this context means like an excessive tendency to think, I am this body, and to just really get into that and just really take that as the fundamental truth about who and what I am. So, of course, it's true, I'm not this body. But what am I then? What this idea would say, this empiric knowledge would say is, you are simply spirit soul. But what are you as spirit soul? Are you simply spirit soul? And that's all, that's the end. That's the complete answer to the question of who are you or what are you? It would be something, it would be like the equivalent of saying, if you ask a person, who are you? And the person says, I am a human being. That's it. So it's not that it's wrong, but it's just it's too basic, actually. Or maybe I am a male, or I am a female. It may be completely true as far as it goes, but it just doesn't go far enough. If we really want to understand who are you, even just in material terms, we got to learn some things about you, type of person you are, your personality maybe, your occupation and your situation in life. You get the idea. And then we'll get a more sort of helpful picture of who you are. But if you say, I am a human being, it's not that it's wrong, it's just not going far enough to really be very interesting. So that's the point there, that devotional service mixed with empiric knowledge, what it means is knowledge of the fact that I am an eternal spirit soul and I am not this body, but that's full stop, that's as far as it goes. So therefore, even though it's not like wrong, I used to go to Russia before Russia changed, and you get people in Russia, would you believe, when they turned to communism, it was such a big thing, that now there are factories and we can work in a factory and actually earn some money and get a house to live in Wow. Because before that, they were the peasantry. They were peasants. And, they lived like animals, basically. Yeah. It was really an abusive system. So they celebrated the factories, and we can now work and actually get something from our work. So therefore, I have met people when I used to go to Russia, Mr. Factory. Really, Mr. Factory. And I've met people, Mr. Tractor. Yeah, because these things revolutionized the lives of these people who otherwise were, it would be very hard to really imagine actually what they were going through. But it was really bad. So Mr. Factory, Mr. Tractor, and things like that. Yeah. Mrs. Secretary. Yeah, you meet these people and they say, yeah, that's my name. I'm Mrs. Secretary. Haribol. So, don't worry too much about it. We have Mr. Carpenter, don't we? We do have our sort of equivalents, Mr. White, Mr. Brown, Mr. Black. It's kind of a related culture. So Lord Caitanya then says, so after hearing this, the Lord, as usual, rejected it, considering it to be external devotional service. It's devotional service, so it's not completely out of the question. Actually, it's good, but it's just incomplete. So he asks to speak further, please. And so Ramananda Roy says, pure devotional service. This is getting very good. Pure devotional service without any touch of speculative knowledge, just very authorized, correct understandings of reality, including of yourself. Pure devotional service without any touch of speculative knowledge is the essence of perfection. Well, it couldn't be too bad. And let me just read, there's a few verses, in fact, that Ramananda Roy gives to substantiate each time he's suggested something. There's usually a couple or even 3 or 4 verses to back up what he said. So in this one, what he says is the translation. It's a famous Srimad Bhagavatam verse. Lord Brahma said, my dear Lord, those devotees who have thrown away the impersonal conception of the absolute truth and have therefore abandoned discussing empiric philosophical truths should hear from self-realized devotees about your holy name, form, pastimes, and qualities. They should completely follow the principles of devotional service and remain free from illicit sex, gambling, intoxication, and animal slaughter. Surrendering themselves fully with body, words, and mind, they can live in any ashram or social status. Indeed, you are conquered by such persons, although you are always unconquerable. In other words, this is a very glorious verse, actually. It's a very glorious verse. But in the context we're looking at things, what is the ultimate goal of life? Well, Lord Caitanya, at least you know what he says? He says, this is all right. Other things he just said, no. thanks but no thanks. So he says, this is all right, but still you can speak more. In other words, okay, we accept this, but you can speak more, like elaborate further, clarify further, go deeper into the subject like that, because we're talking about, going as far as it's possible to go. So Ramananda Roy replies, Prema Bhakti, ecstatic love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the essence of all perfection. And Lord Caitanya says, this is all right. No, this is pretty good, actually. But if you know more, please tell me. Yeah. So if you know more, please tell me. And Ramananda Roy says, spontaneous loving service in servitude means, if you're familiar with the terminologies at all, dasya ras. There are 5 types of eternal relationships available or possible for a living being. Eternal relationship with Krishna. First one is called Shanta Rasa. Shanta means neutral, means sort of not proactive. You're just sort of observing. Look at Krishna, wow, he's great. But Dasya Ras, servitude, means he's so great, I'm going to serve him. So that's what he says here. Spontaneous, loving service in servitude, as exchanged by master and servant, is the highest perfection. So, Lord Caitanya Charitamrita doesn't say exactly what he says, but basically what he said, if you can go further, please go further. And Ramananda Roy, so what he does is one step at a time, one inquiry at a time. First he goes, with servitude as a servant. Next he goes to loving service as a friend, then loving service as a parent, then loving service, conjugal loving service, like between Radha and Krishna. And Lord Caitanya, you know what he says? He says, this statement is very good. I like it. You're doing okay, actually. You're doing well. So step by step they reach that point. And when conjugal love, like Radharani for Krishna, is suggested, Lord Caitanya says, this is certainly the limit of perfection. But speak more if you can. And Ramananda Roy replies, until this day, I didn't know anyone in this material world who could inquire beyond this. Yeah. But anyway, so Lord Caitanya is very happy. This is the limit of perfection, but speak more if there is more. So they go back and forth a little bit, and then Lord Caitanya says, okay, can you please continue though? Yeah. And Ramananda Roy now says, I don't think my intelligence goes beyond this. So what happens is the last level, which is the ultimate level, is love in separation. Would you believe it? It's higher than love in any one of the rasas specifically, but love in any one of the rasas, but in separation from Krishna. Can you imagine that you love someone, but you have to stay in separation. And you think, no, this is not good. I mean, there's the saying, I'm sure you've heard, separation makes the heart grow fonder. Have you heard that? But then there's also the saying, out of sight, out of mind. So what is it? You've got to watch out for these sayings. But there's an interesting, just to illustrate the point, an interesting incident between Lord Ram and Mother Sita when they were in exile. That one day they were actually in the Mayapur Navadweep area, and they were on one of the islands. Oh, Krishna, not Godrum Dweep, but anyway, one of the islands which is famous for having a big tree there. Something or other. Any suggestion? Anyway, one of them like that. So Mother Sita saw, there is Lord Ramachandra sitting in meditation, eyes closed, like something like this. But he's got this big smile on his face. He's obviously meditating on something just really wonderful. So when he comes out of the meditation, she asks him, what were you meditating on? And Lord Ram says, I was meditating on the fact that you and I are going to take birth in this area later in Kali Yuga, and we'll be husband and wife again. We will be together again, but here. And Mother Sita said, oh, that's great. That's wonderful. We're going to be together again. Oh, in this beautiful place. So, and Lord Ram said, yes. And at that time, I am going to give you some special mercy. And Mother Sita was, really happy about that. I am going to give you the greatest gift of all. And Sita was extremely happy. What is it, please? And Lord Ram said, I am going to give you the experience of love in separation. In that, at that time, I am going to leave you and take sannyas, and you'll never see me again in that lifetime. And Sita was not happy about that at all. Well, that's terrible. How could you do that? And Lord Ram explained that the experience of love in separation is higher than the experience of love when you're together. Because that's the ultimate understanding, actually, in Krishna consciousness. It evokes the separation, evokes a strong, a much more intensive feeling of affection, but a feeling of being together also. The feeling of togetherness, which is there in separation, is stronger than the feeling of togetherness when you're in togetherness. Hare Krishna. Isn't that quite something? So, devotees, I'm going to quickly now run through the second conversation. It's really interesting. Anyway, you think about these things. The first thing Lord Caitanya accepted and said, this is all right, was pure devotional service. So that's all right. We can aspire for that at this stage. Just pure devotional service, and that's acceptable by the Lord. And then once you reach that stage, then you can go on to some of these other stages which Ramananda Roy presented, having a particular type of relationship in love, not just in a sort of broad, non-specific sense, love, but in a very specific sense, particular type of relationship like that. Yeah, so for us now, we should focus on becoming pure devotees, which is easier said than done. But it can be done. It can definitely be done, and it must be done. We must really try for that. And by the grace of the Lord, we can achieve it. I remember when I'd been a devotee just a few weeks, and I was asked, because I was one of the few devotees who was an experienced driver. I was asked to drive one senior devotee somewhere, so I did. And he preached to me the whole way. He was really nice. Hari Vilas Prabhu, now in Seattle. And we were talking about the regulative principles. And he said, there's only one regulative principle. Always remember Krishna and never forget him. That's all. And the others, don't do this and don't do that, and you must do something else. No, if you just always remember Krishna and never forget him, you've done it. It's sort of like all-inclusive. And I thought, hey, yeah, that's good. I'm going to try and do that. But then I found it's easier said than done. But still it can be done, and we have to work towards it. So the next night, actually, Lord Caitanya inquired, of all types of education, which is the most important? Go and tell us, is it what? BA, BCom, MBA, DBA? Ramananda Roy replied, no education is important other than the transcendental devotional service of Krishna. So all of you hard-working students at university, I'm sorry. Anyway, for maintenance, you may have to get, some sort of degree. But maintenance, the dogs and cats are maintaining themselves. Look, the plants their lives are being maintained. So just to be able to maintain yourself is not like some high goal. It's just, it's an extremely basic thing. But in terms of the ultimate goal of life, then no education's important other than the transcendental devotional service of Krishna. There's a song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, called Vidyara Vilase, which means my pastimes of education. And at the end of it, he says that he describes how he went through a whole process of education. And he says, at the end, I came out like a donkey. Gede, if you understand the language. I came out like a donkey. Yeah. Because donkeys, they also maintain themselves. So, but in ultimate terms, like real significance in life, we have to understand devotional service, how to serve the Lord. Then Lord Caitanya asked, out of all glorious activities, which is the most glorious? And Ramananda Roy replied, that person who is reputed to be a devotee of Lord Krishna enjoys the utmost fame and glory. In other words, instead of becoming president of a country or prime minister, they become very famous, of course, or a famous entertainer or all that sort of thing. Rich, famous, rich person. I mean, everyone's heard of Bill Gates and Mr. Musk and all of them. They're famous. But in a really meaningful, substantial sense, if you're famous as a devotee for being like a real devotee, that sort of fame, he says, then you enjoy the utmost fame and glory. And here's an interesting question. Lord Caitanya asked, of the many capitalists who possess great riches, who is the topmost? Who is it? Mr. Musk, is it? I've heard a little. Ramananda Roy replied, he who is richest in love for Radha and Krishna is the greatest capitalist. And we might think these are just sort of colorful statements made by a colorful devotee who's just inspired and excited about Krishna consciousness and, something like that. But it's not that. It's true. These things are all true. So, okay. Now here is, wow, this is really a good one. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked, of all kinds of distress, what is the most painful? You can imagine some distressful situations easily. So I won't bother suggesting, but you know what would be distressing for you. Ramananda Roy replied, apart from separation from the devotee of Krishna, I know of no unbearable unhappiness. This is very profound, yeah. Because as we progress in devotional service step by step, we come to realize and really realize in the sense we really feel these things in our hearts and in our lives, that the association of the devotees is just something just wonderful and blissful, relishable. And it's better than, whatever other alternatives might be there, going to the beach or finding a lot of money or just something along those lines. So apart from separation from the devotee of Krishna, I know of no unbearable unhappiness. So we can pray to the Lord, as it's actually Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he does, Kabe habe bolo se din amar. When will that day come when I will feel these things actually? Instead of them being sort of theoretical ideas, interesting ideas in Krishna consciousness, but we actually really feel, yes, that's what it is. Then Lord Caitanya inquired, out of all liberated persons, who should be accepted as the greatest? Ramananda Roy replied, he who has love for Krishna has attained the topmost liberation. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu next asked Ramananda Roy, among many songs, which song is to be considered the actual religion of the living entity? Song. If you're a Bollywood fan, you would know many theme songs, wouldn't you? I was in Mauritius a fair number of years ago, going into the big public gardens, Pamplemousse, and there was a security officer who checked our tickets, and he had a little device for, I think, a radio. And I heard this, this sort of funky Bollywood music, and I tuned in a bit. And I realized this is the theme song for Om Shanti Om. So I'm sure that is many people's favorites. I'm sure. I'm really sure. So, but now the thing is, though, that here Lord Caitanya says that which song is to be considered the actual religion of the living entity. And Ramananda Roy replied, that song describing the loving affairs of Sri Radha and Krishna is superior to all other songs. And it's nice to learn some of our Gaudiya Vaishnav songs, because some of them, all of them actually, but, in this context here, some of them are just so beautiful. Like Radha Krishna Pranamor, Narottam Das Thakur. Radha Krishna Pranamor means they're my life and soul. And then the song goes on describing in different ways, how he interacts with Radha and Krishna, with his deities, actually. Or a song like Sri Rupa Manjari Pada, another very beautiful song, which actually Prabhupada gave us. He encouraged us to learn. So these are just beautiful songs. And if we can learn these songs and get into a habit of singing these songs, then it'll really help us spiritually. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked, out of all auspicious and beneficial activities, which is best for the living entity? Beneficial, like, helping people, that sort of thing, helping those who are suffering, etc., that sort of idea. And Ramananda Roy replied, the only auspicious activity is association with the devotees of Krishna. The only auspicious activity. Yeah. So, by distributing books, sometimes some people criticize us because, even though we do Food for Life and typical people in the street, they can appreciate, this is beneficial to people who are hungry, who are struggling. They can appreciate. But our book distribution, many people cannot appreciate how this is beneficial. In fact, many people think we're just trying to make money, sell books, get money, and that's the idea. But actually, it's the most beneficial thing, because if they get a book, if they read the book, and if they really get into it, then they become devotees on the basis of reading the book, then they'll never have to take birth again in this material world. They'll go back to Godhead for eternal life full of bliss and knowledge. But if we feed or clothe or house or whatever, help people who are struggling in different ways, just in material ways we help them, then okay, it helps them for a while. But, even if somehow they get their lives together, not in Krishna consciousness, but even though they've got food to eat, they've got clothes, they've got a place to stay, and they live like that till they die. In the next life, who knows what sort of birth they're going to take in this material world. Yeah. But usually, practically any birth is not a good birth. Even if you're born in a billionaire's family. It's a bad situation. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked, what should all living entities constantly remember? Ramananda Roy replied, the chief objects of remembrance are always the Lord's holy name, qualities, and pastimes. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu further inquired, out of many types of meditation, which is required for all living entities? Ramananda Roy replied, the chief duty of every living entity is to meditate upon the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. I mean, that's true. Of course it's true. But this can also be applied like in the context, in the other questioning that was happening, which we talked about first. Pure devotional service. If we meditate on pure devotional service and we try to do it, then this is like conforming with this idea of meditating on the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna, because devotional service is a form of their lotus feet. Then, where should the living entity live, abandoning all other places? Ramananda Roy replied, he should live in Johannesburg. Oh, wait a minute, what's that? Oh no, should live in Vrindavan, where the Lord performed his rasa dance. And if you can't go to go and live in India, generally it's better to already have made the money you need to live, because it's not easy to make money in India unless you're one of the locals. Yeah. So, for most of us, best place to live is like in some decent, nice, clean place, not too far from the temple, like that. And to transform that place into a Krishna conscious place by having deities, by having nice pictures around, having a nice morning program, evening program, all these things, then you're living in Vrindavan. If you've got lots of pictures of Krishna, and instead of watching television, maybe you watch Krishna conscious videos, etc., etc. Like here, look, here we are, Vrindavan. I know one family in Durban, in Isipingo, and in their temple room, you cannot see the wall. Here at least you can see the wall, can't you? Although there's a picture also. But you cannot see the walls because they're totally, from the floor to the ceiling, covered completely in pictures of Krishna. And you cannot see the ceiling because it's covered in pictures of Krishna. Hare Krishna. So we should live in a holy place, in the holy place, notice Vrindavan, or transform where we're living into Vrindavan. Out of all topics people listen to, which is best for all living entities? Ramananda Roy replied, hearing about the loving affairs between Radha and Krishna is most pleasing to the ear. So that's there. But, Prabhupada encouraged us, he really encouraged us to read his books and read all his books, not just the parts of his books which are talking about Radha and Krishna specifically, particularly. I mean, that's there to be read also. But we should read all. Prabhupada, actually, I was reading just a few days ago. Prabhupada said we should read every word in his books. Yeah, That's pretty specific, because it's tantamount to hearing about the loving affairs of Radha and Krishna, actually. Yeah. So we're almost there. Right, two more, yeah. Among all worshipable objects, which is the chief? Ramananda Roy replied, the chief worshipable object is the holy name of Radha and Krishna, the Hare Krishna mantra, even more worshipable than the deity on the altar. Yeah. And not to minimize deities, but actually the most worshipable object is the holy name of Radha and Krishna, the Hare Krishna mantra, that we should focus on first and foremost. So then, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked, this is the last question, what is the destination of those who desire liberation? Means like impersonal liberation, if you know what I mean by that. Merging into the Lord, that sort of thing. Merging into the light, which is coming from the body of the Lord. That type of liberation. So what's the destination of those who desire liberation and those who desire sense gratification? Ramananda Roy replied, those who attempt to merge into the existence of the Supreme Lord, means like, there's a little slogan, you probably heard it, to become one. It's all one. Try to achieve some oneness with God. This is the type of person that he's talking about. Those who attempt to merge, become one with the existence of the Lord, will have to accept bodies like those of trees. We got a few trees here. You never know what their backgrounds were, seriously. And those who are overly inclined towards sense gratification will attain the bodies of demigods. Then Ramananda Roy continued, those who are devoid of all transcendental mellows, in other words, those who are not attached to Radha and Krishna, attached to serving Krishna, attached to chanting the names of Radha and Krishna. Those who are devoid of all transcendental mellows are like the crows that suck the juice from the bitter fruits of the neem tree of knowledge. Have any of you eaten neem fruit? It's good for the health. So's garlic, but anyone who eats garlic, I tell you what, I'd rather stay sick, I think. But neem is bitter. Whoa, bitter. I think it's worse than unlucky. Unlucky is another test. Gee whiz. So that the crows are famous for pretty much eating anything, just anything. Therefore, they hang around rubbish dumps, even things I cannot mention, even things that are worse than things I cannot mention. So they suck the juice from the bitter fruits of the neem tree of knowledge. Means just materialistic knowledge or impersonal knowledge. Whereas those who enjoy mellows means the sweet experience of chanting the names of the Lord, hearing about the Lord, serving the Lord. So those who enjoy mellows are like the cuckoos who eat the buds of the mango tree of love of Godhead. Then, Lord Caitanya was so happy, you know what he did? If we were in the Radharanath temple, we could show you, because the picture's there. Lord Caitanya was just so happy. He showed himself to Ramananda Roy as Srimati Radharani and Lord Krishna. He appeared before him as Radha and Krishna. And then they vowed to spend the rest of their lives together, just immersed in all these subjects. Hare Krishna. Okay, I hope that wasn't sort of too much for anyone or everyone or someone. But we should really try and focus on these things in suitable ways, and they'll really help us to advance. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Sri Ramananda Roy ki,